writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tara.
So this week on the podcast, we are talking to Brad West, who is one of the creators of Vellum. And if you don't know what Vellum is an ebook creation software that creates ePubs and also print books for indie authors.
It's one of the most favorite software by indie authors. We've heard from authors at conferences that have mobbed the two Brads, just saying that it's reduced the time that it takes to make ePubs from days to hours, and they really love it.
So we kind of got into how he started his own business and the parallels between that and also being an indie author. There's a lot of parallels between both business plans, I would say.
And also where ePubs are going to go in the future in terms of like accessibility and what does Vellum have planned down the line.
We really enjoyed talking to Brad and we hope you enjoy our interview.
So really happy to welcome Brad West from Vellum here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It was very exciting to get to talk to you. I've never seen both Brads at Vellum have sort of like rock star status in the author community. Steph, I don't know if you've been to a conference with anywhere near the Vellum guys, but authors adore you. So there's always like a crowd of people, which so I'm just like, well, who are those guys? But no, I'm glad for you to get to come and talk to us.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is nice to talk to people back when we could talk to people. That was nice too. But yeah, we do enjoy talking to authors and hearing how they're using Vellum. And it's always great to hear that it's helping them save time and get their books out.
Great. So do you want to tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in working in ebooks in particular?
Sure. I'm a software developer. Before this, I worked with my partner at Vellum, Brad Andelman. We worked at Pixar for 15 years and developed something totally different, a giant animation package at Pixar. And, we were there for about 15 years and developed a lot of cool projects and just decided that we wanted to do something else. So we left there and, looked around at what problems we might be able to solve, just a small company of two people. And at the time, my wife was really into reading books by indie authors. And, I bought her a Kindle a long time ago and, expected she'd have like 3 or 4 books on it. And I looked over, she had like hundreds. And I thought, what is going on? So she actually helped me understand what was going on then, that big burst. And then one day she said, what's formatting? like, what do you mean? She's like, because all these authors are really excited about being able to publish and being able to reach readers directly, but they keep talking about formatting. It sounds like the worst thing in the world. So, that was good. That was around the time that we had moved on and we're looking at different projects. And so we took that problem and mapped out what it means to format a book and put it on a whiteboard and just realized, this is pretty complicated. And especially for someone who's trying to do all these things at once, write a book, get it up, market it, all these things, spending days of getting your files just so you can look at them seemed like a pretty horrible thing. So that was the inspiration, and we spent about a year putting together the very first version of Vellum, and it's evolved over the years since then, and we now have many authors who use that and will come and tell us that they now can put together a book in a matter of minutes, and that's really cool to hear. So that's the short version of the story. That's where we are today.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that your wife is so involved in the indie community that she was getting into sort of the pain points.
Yeah.
Does she write it herself?
She doesn't.
Or was it just that?
She doesn't. But this is a cool thing about indie publishing is you can make that connection. And so she was just going beyond the book and reading blogs or Twitter. Maybe Twitter then, I don't know. But, just finding more about those authors and finding more about that experience and making that connection. So yeah, that's really helped understand both, that specific problem of formatting, but also what that role is like. It's very different than, what people imagined an author was maybe, 10 years ago.
Before we get into kind of the details of Vellum and why ebooks are so complicated when they seem like they would be such an easy thing, I wanted to know just a little bit about, so you and Brad working at Pixar, and you were saying you're going to start your own business. Like, I don't know if you're at liberty to share, but what were some ideas that were scrapped? Like, what did you go for first before you decided on ebook?
We knew that we wanted to help people with their job. We knew we wanted to be a professional tool and not, say, write a game. And so, we were just kind of talking to everyone we knew. I was remodeling our house at the time, so I was talking to our contractor about, what kind of tools might help them. We went through a few things. I think we went far down a road with helping wedding planners, just different things that seem like a far stretch today, but we knew we wanted to just help people get their job done.
Did anything surprise you when you first started your own business?
I guess one thing, as a software person, I think people in tech maybe overestimate the uniqueness of starting a tech business, as opposed to, and when you talk about a brand new company that's doing some tech, it's a startup. When your friend is starting a restaurant, that's a small business. They're very similar propositions. And I guess what I've learned is, there's a lot of information out there about small businesses. And I think this applies to someone who's hoping to become an author full time. That's a small business. And, there's great advice out there about how long it's going to take before, you can reasonably expect to be profitable, how to think about marketing. And so both there's advice and just forms of books of, making a business plan like that. And also just in terms of, other people who've done this. If you're an aspiring indie author, you may not have many friends or relatives who are also aspiring indie authors, but you probably know someone who has some small business. And there are lessons to be learned there. And it's not immediately obvious that someone who has started a vet clinic might have tips for someone who wants to write romance, but there's just a lot in common. And, when people just talk about how long it takes and being discovered, there's just a lot of overlap there. So there's more information out there, especially if you just get out of what you think is your little specialty.
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of comparative arc there between you starting Vellum and creating a business and an independent author like starting their business. It's the same idea and the same goal, I guess, is, being successful at the end.
For sure, even down to, fact that I've got an office in my basement and I'm hiding from my kids. Every author out there can relate to that same thing.
We're all doing that now as well.
All of us.
We're all just hiding in basements. So if anyone isn't kind of that familiar with Vellum itself, so it's an ebook production tool. So could you give us a quick sort of once over of it, how it works?
Yeah, so where we come into the picture typically is you've written your book, you've written it in Word or in Scrivener, and it's just a really long file with all of your content, but not really formatted for publishing. You can take that file, a Word file typically, and just bring that into Vellum, and Vellum is going to analyze that and break that all up into a book and automatically format it so it looks like a real book with chapter headings and a table of contents, and for print having page numbers, all of that as automatically as possible. And then when you're in there, you can make whatever edits you need, and then you can see how that's going to appear in print and then on specific devices like on a phone or on a Kobo reader. So it really gives you a sense of what you're going to see that's going to be a lot different than, a bunch of words in a Word document. And I think can be both informative and it can feel a little exciting to actually see your book in a form other than this huge Word file, to actually see it, look like chapters. We do hear from people who write their book in Vellum, not because we offer a particularly amazing word processor, but because they just like that feeling of seeing the words show up on the page as they're writing. So that's what we're offering, is quick and easy formatting and a good preview of how everything is going to appear. And as you get used to it, hopefully, being able to come into Vellum, have your book ready, and get it off to stores as quickly as possible.
That's awesome. So I used to work, and Steph does currently work. For a while, the two of us worked together as the book people at Kobo. So we were cracking open the EPUB files and fixing any potential errors. So this kind of tool really means that an author, I think a couple of years ago, if you really wanted to have a good book that was really well readable and had no problems, as an independent author, you might wanted to have educated yourself on creating an EPUB file itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like technology has now evolved to the fact where they don't really need to worry about that. Yeah. That was the aim with Vellum, I assume. Yeah.
Definitely. That's the goal. We realize that we want, writers to be able to focus on writing and all of the other jobs. So learning everything involved with creating an EPUB, it is possible. And I know there are authors who actually love doing that, but it isn't probably for most people. And so we offer a way to just not have to worry about that at all.
So do you have any tips or tricks that an author either might not know about when they're using Vellum, or some quick guidelines they should always do when they're working in your program?
A thing that, especially since we're talking to Kobo, a thing that not all authors realize, especially if they're brand new, is that Vellum, when it generates ebook files, is going to generate multiple files, not just one EPUB file that you just send everywhere. Vellum's going to create a specific file for the stores that you're interested in. So if you want to publish with Kobo, Vellum is going to create a file tailored to all of Kobo's specs. And that includes, this is an important thing, when you have more than one book out there and you want to encourage readers to read the next book in a series, for example, a great way to do that is just give them a link straight to the next book in the series in the store. So Vellum can help you make sure that the Kobo version of your book, any links to other books that you want to offer to the reader, are going to go straight to Kobo and not to some other store. And for one, that makes stores happy to have links to their store and not to some other store. And that also makes a reader happy because they will probably want to have all of their books from the same store. So that's a feature called store links that we have in Vellum. And the way that works is you can just enter information for every store, and Vellum automatically chooses which information goes in which version of the book. So as much as we think that feature is useful, it can take some time to set up, especially if you've got a huge catalog of books. Setting up 20 links for 4 or 5 different stores can take some time. And so a tip that we often show people is that once you have that set up, you can reuse that from book to book. So in Vellum on your Mac, you can just drag and drop stuff from one book to the other. And in fact, we hear from authors who set all that up for their front matter, maybe in their back matter, maybe they're about the author page, there's also by page, their copyright, any of that templated stuff that they are using over and over again, they can just drag that into a brand new book and have all that information ready to go. And so really the only new content in the book is what comes from, that particular story.
That's awesome. So they can just keep on file one about the author and then add that to the books as they go. So they don't need to constantly be having it in each file itself.
Yeah. So, what we typically hear is they'll just keep a file. In Vellum, typically you have a file for each book you're working on, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can just have a file of material that you never publish, but you can just reuse that material from book to book.
Are the majority of files that go through Vellum mostly just text-only kind of reflowable files, or do you also do pictures and comic books, or how does it work with content like that?
All the ebooks will be reflowable, and if you're not familiar with that term, reflowable means that the book will adapt to the device you're reading on. So if you're reading on a small phone, it's going to lay out for that. If you're reading on an iPad, you're going to get more content there. Reflowable generally is more suitable for text-based books, but Vellum does allow you to incorporate images. It's not something you'd want to use for a comic book, but if you're, say, publishing a memoir where you have lots of pictures, or even if you just want to, on your About the Author page, have an author photo, you can do that. That's a really common thing, but we've seen books with hundreds of photos go through, but it will always be reflowable.
Nice. So I have my epic fantasy story and I've got maps of all of my worlds and I can include them all.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And actually, we're talking mainly about ebooks, but Vellum can also handle your print edition, and we added some great features. So if you do have a fantasy book and you do have a beautiful map that you've hired an illustrator to create, we can make that nice and big in your print edition. And then in your ebook, but the great thing about an ebook on most devices, you can zoom in and stuff like so. We can provide a nice high resolution image for your ebook.
I was wondering if you've seen any really innovative or interesting books that an author has created using Vellum. This might be a tough question.
Yeah. Let's see. That is a tough question. I think I'm just always surprised at maybe not the technical innovation, but just the information that's out there. And I think this is a great thing about indie publishing is the very specific books that you have out there, whether it's, just, when you get into nonfiction, especially, reading information about, how to find camping sites on Bureau of Land Management land is a very specific topic that you would probably not see traditionally published, but it's a really valuable resource for people who are interested in that. So I think we don't see every book that comes through in Vellum because a lot of those books are on people's computers, but every once in a while we'll get a book that maybe an author had a question about, and you do learn some things that maybe you never thought you would learn about.
Have you ever just then bought the book afterwards? You're like, this was really interesting.
Yeah, I did. There was one author that I'm kind of referring to. She contacted us saying, I hope you can get back to me soon because I'm staying in a friend's driveway. And I was like, oh, that's weird. What does that mean? And then I looked at her book and I'm like, oh, this person is a full-time RVer, which is more common today than maybe it was several years ago. But that was reading that book was when I realized, oh, okay, this is now I understand. She has internet for the next 24 hours, and then she's going to be in the middle of Wyoming. So that was cool to be able to help her out. And then, I went and bought the book and learned a whole bunch of things about full-time RVing that is maybe I'll use one day.
RVing is big on YouTube.
Get out of we'll all get out of our basements one day and just live in smaller vans.
Maybe that's what I should be doing. But I have a question about features. So a lot of time we'll talk to authors and they'll think of a feature that we had never even considered. Have you ever had any instances where an author's come to you with an idea and you hadn't even thought of that would be great for Vellum?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've heard, I guess it wasn't totally off the wall, but we maybe underestimated how appreciated it would be and how used it would be. And this is for print, is making images full bleed, going all the way to the edge of the page. And that was the kind of thing that we talked about. We thought it was cool. We didn't know how many people would use it, and it was going to require a lot of revisiting things. So we just kind of continued to like, well, that would be nice, but no one's ever going to use it. Until we went to one conference, and it just happened to come up several times of like, hey, could you do this? And I think part of that was that this is kind of a trend happening in YA books, especially, where they'd have these like really cool illustrations that would cover the full page. And, there's like, hey, traditional published books can do this. Why can't we? And, it was enough to say, well, let's do this. Let's sit down and get all this work done. And we were happy with it. And, we've just seen a ton of really cool title pages where, it just spans the whole spread, like a really great high resolution photo and the title on top. And it's really brought a level of customization to books that I think authors like to be able to express that individuality. Helps tie in with their cover designs. And I think, it's a kind of thing that resonated, was like, hey, this is something that has been out of reach, and it felt good to like put that in reach and make it pretty straightforward to do. So that's been a fun thing. That was something we released in 2020 at the beginning of this year.
Nice. And I just wanted to ask about kind of, are you able to automate the process of creating like print ready files? Like, what's more difficult to you, like creating an ebook or creating like a print file? And why are they different?
There are advantages of each and disadvantages of each. Print can be time consuming because everyone is so much pickier about what shows up in print, and so Vellum does a lot of things to kind of fine tune each page to make sure the bottom of a spread matches and make sure you don't have widows. And so everyone has their glasses on when they're looking at print. And so we really want to make sure that looks as good as it can. The nice thing though is, once you have that all down, what you see is what you get. And as opposed to ebooks, where I think, especially if an author is not used to reading ebooks, the concept that, well, it's going to look like this on a phone, and it's going to look like this on an iPad, and it's going to look like this on an e-ink reader, takes a while to understand. And just technically, with print, you've got a single PDF, and that PDF can work pretty much anywhere. With ebooks, a file that will work great at Kobo may not work so well if you send it to Barnes and Noble. So that can be really tricky. We try to make that very simple, but regardless of that, it does take some people some time to understand that, like, oh, you know what, how this appears on an ebook is going to totally change based on what device is being used and what font the reader has chosen. So understanding, hey, I have control over these things, but not these things, takes a while. But we hope that no matter how that is being laid out, that you still have something that looks professional and, is easy to read.
Do you have any new features you think authors would be excited to hear about coming out in the future, or maybe in 2021, whenever?
2021, oh man.
Yeah. Tell us your secret.
A big thing that we've been working on that I guess, let's see, by the time this comes out, so this is maybe less exciting, but for users, but it's kind of thing that we want to make sure that works. And we are a piece of software that works on Mac, and Apple announced a ton of changes over the summer, including brand new Macs using brand new chips and new versions of Mac OS. So that's actually been something that we've been working on the past several months to make sure that Vellum will work on these new computers coming out. And maybe by the time this comes out, those computers will be shipping and Vellum will be working just great on them. We do have a feature coming that is going to make it a little bit easier to work with occasions where you have bits of text that you only want in your ebook. And so to back up a little bit, Vellum does produce files for both print and ebook. And our hope is you can do that from just one file. So if you ever need to make a change or find a typo, come back to Vellum, you make that change. You can generate new files, both for all ebook files for all your stores and a print edition, all from one place. There are some places where you might have something that really only makes sense in ebook. So maybe you have a page where you're saying, hey, sign up for my newsletter, click here. That's great in an ebook. It's going to look funny if you see that in a paperback. So we've long had some options to say, hey, this section I only want in an ebook, and this section I only want in print. And we'll be adding a few new options there that make that a little bit easier to do in the future.
Nice. That's exciting. It'll be very convenient for the authors.
Yeah, that's our hope, that they can just have that one file. And I guess that's something that if you've done this a few times, you realize that when you put your book out there, it's not quite done. You're always going to be making changes, whether that's because of a typo or because you want to update your bio or because you want to update your list of other books available. So we want to make it easier for you to come back, make those small changes, have new files that you can publish again.
Definitely. I have a question. So when I was in ePub school, learning how to make ePubs, a lot of the teacher would say, a lot of people ask for an app and not an ebook, because the things they want their ebook to be able to do is essentially an app. So I'm just wondering, where do you think ePubs are going to be going in the future? Like new accessibility, some interactive features. Where do you see ePubs going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think there is always a place for a story. And, a lot of the books that we love and cherish are stories and don't need interactivity. As much fun as it is to look at an interactive version of Moby Dick, it's really the content that's there. So I think maybe it's not the ePub format, maybe it'll be some other format, but I think there's always a place for, that text. Interactivity, I think, is a interesting thing. There have been efforts to try to wedge interactivity into ePub, and I would kind of agree. There's a line where, at some point, if you really want something interactive, having an app or having something web-based is, probably a better route. But I think there's always going to be a place for, stories.
The files that you output at the moment, do you do anything specific in terms of accessibility? It's something that we talk a lot about at Kobo that we're quite conscious of, and we work with W3C of trying to make sure that that's a main focus. So whether it's just including metadata, or is there any tips that you have for somebody that could help with accessibility?
Yeah, so I guess the number one tip is, if you are publishing to Kobo, generate the Kobo specific file from Vellum. That will be an ePub 3 file. It will have as much metadata as we can put in, and so that is the best file to send to Kobo. We take care of a number of things automatically for accessibility. If you set up your file in Vellum, you really don't have to do anything extra. So that includes things like landmarks, which are information about where the beginning of the book is, what type of, if you have, say, something like a foreword or a prologue, or what those parts of the story are. And that's something you can set up in Vellum, and that carries through into the metadata. So for many books, especially if it's just text, that's the one and only thing you should do is send an ePub 3 to Kobo or any other retailer that accepts it. If you're incorporating images, there is, in Vellum, you can add what we call an accessibility description, and that's a description that will be used in case a reader can't see that image. Vellum will pop up a little warning if you leave that blank. So it's good to fill that in, and also, make sure it's something useful to a reader who won't be able to see that image. And then I think the last thing is just links. If you're creating links, it's good to make the text of those links meaningful. But that's about it. For the rest of it, we try to take care of. We did a big revisit at the beginning of this year to add another layer of metadata based on the current DAISY standards. So files that come from Vellum should have a lot of accessibility information, and we'll continue doing that because we definitely agree that that's important, and it's a great opportunity to have all of this content in ways that can be accessed by so many different people.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And I think it goes back to what you're kind of saying about stories always being there. Making sure your files are accessible just means that you're also hitting that other type of reader as well.
Yeah, for sure.
We should tell listeners that we do accept EPUB 3 files in case you're wondering.
Yes.
Yeah, everyone should send EPUB 3 files. Always.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have plans to expand to non-English language settings platforms? I don't know what I'm right word is.
We do have non-English users. Vellum works best for left to right languages. So books in Arabic or Hebrew we're probably not the best option for, but we do see a lot of books in German and French and Dutch and Italian. The interface itself of Vellum is not localized to all those places, but we do have options where you can change how the word chapter to be something local. And that's, I think, helpful for people who are in, say, Germany writing books, but also if you're in the US and you're creating translations of your books, you want to make sure that, if you're creating a translation in Spanish or Italian, that it looks correct in those languages. So yeah, we do have a lot of people using Vellum that way.
Cool. And I think maybe your most asked question, will you be expanding Vellum so that PC users can access it?
Yeah, not in the near term. As I kind of mentioned at the front, we're a very small company. It's just the two of us. And that was a choice that we made. This is the company we wanted to do. This was, just like being an indie author. It's like, hey, this is how we want to do things. And, as with anything, that means saying no to things. So that means focusing on one platform. So that's our answer today, that, as long as it's just a two-person company, we're going to have to focus on one platform. In the future, if we decide to grow to be a larger company, that we'll probably consider that. We certainly get that question anytime we are somewhere. But for now, it's Mac only.
It's great that you two are so hands-on though. It's just the two Brads working on this stuff. Do you ever find it difficult balancing kind of the support with authors directly with wanting to develop some of these new features or fixing things?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's all what are we going to do? And, again, just like authors, is in addition to handling support and developing new stuff, it's also thinking about marketing and, promoting our business. And, as two software developers, we have much more fun writing code and making new features, but we are also business people. So we need to think about those things, including, doing taxes and stuff like that. There's a bit of that that's rewarding in a way. There's something nice about understanding your taxes. I guess similar to the reward you get of changing your own oil, there's something nice about having an understanding of everything. But yes, it is a balancing act, and you do need to make sure that you always have time to do the thing that you really love. So that is a trick to manage.
What would you say is the best thing that you've done for your business?
I would say the best thing, two things. One is finding something that we could be passionate about for a long time. It's an overused cliche, but it's a marathon. You're doing this for a long time, and we've had tough situations, and to be able to still be excited about, things that are coming, that's an important thing. And I guess that's just, from the, what are you going to spend your days on? It's an important to think about if this is truly what you want to do. Is this something you can be passionate about for a long time? And I think the flip side of that is, making sure that you can have a successful business. And part of that is marketing, is And really what I mean there is finding your audience, finding your customers, understanding your customers. If you asked us several years ago, what our typical customer would look like, we wouldn't really be able to give a great answer of who they are and what we knew formatting was an issue, but how the decisions they make, and really just how to find them and talk to them. So I think that's been a thing that's really helped, is to help understand our customers, really going to conferences and talking to customers and being able to understand what they're doing has really helped us on being able to make a product that works for them, and being able to keep it useful, and being able to maintain, back to the other part, maintain that excitement of continuing to make things as easy as we can for them.
So we always ask people what they've been loving lately, just like could be anything: book, movie, TV show, podcast, anything, an app, something you've learned. I don't know, it could be anything.
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer.
That's fair. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Well, about a year ago for my birthday, my wife bought me a kayak. And when I say she bought me a kayak, really, she gave me permission to go buy a kayak. And that comes to mind because just this morning I was able to, we had nice enough weather and clear enough skies that I was able to just take it out for an hour and, come back and start my day. And, that's been, it just happened to be, that's a great thing you can still do when you have the weather. It's a naturally socially distant thing, and I'm lucky to live in a place where I can do that. So that has definitely been something that has helped keep things together and
it sounds lovely.
Yeah. It's strongly recommend anyone who lives near a lake to buy some sort of, or borrow any sort of watercraft, because it is nice to be out on the water and away from things for a bit.
Yeah, no, that sounds very calming. Just what everyone needs right about now.
Yeah.
So our last question is, so listeners are interested in trying out Vellum. Where can they do that? And then also, I guess, information about pricing, if you can give a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you want to try Vellum, you can go to vellum.pub. .pub. That's our website, and there's a link there where you can download Vellum. Again, you will need a Mac, but you can download Vellum, install it on your Mac, and try it out. The way we have it set up, you can use Vellum as long as you want for free. You can bring in your book. We if you want to bring in your book and get started and see how that looks, you can. We also have a tutorial with a sample manuscript. So some people like that because they don't have to think about their own book for a while and try it out. But that's all free to try out. We only really have you purchase when you want to create those files for publishing. So when you decide, hey, this looks great, I'm ready to publish, that's when you'll need to purchase a license. And we offer two options. One is if you're only publishing ebooks, that's a license we call Vellum eBooks. That's for basically $200 US. If you want to do ebooks and paperback, that's an option we call Vellum Press, and that's $250 US. And that's a one-time purchase.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. Just one time. It's not annual. It's just one.
It's not annual. It's not annual. It's not per book. So if you're one of these people who publishes a book every 2 weeks, you pay it once and hopefully get your money's worth pretty quickly.
And I'm assuming you can upgrade to print if you wanted.
Yeah,
okay.
If you decide later, you can always upgrade to print.
Is everything desktop saved, or do you save anything in the cloud just in case somebody loses their work or anything?
Yeah, you can save files on your desktop. So they're Vellum files, and that contains all the information that you need for publishing. That is saved on your desktop by default, but if you want to have a copy in your cloud, you can make use of Dropbox or Google Drive or iCloud or any of those services. And yeah, that's a good way to, one, if you're working between two Macs, that it's a good way to have your file in both places, and it's also a good backup mechanism, though we strongly recommend a serious backup solution.
No, nobody wants to lose their files. Yeah. If somebody is working between two computers, is that 2 licenses or just 1 license in that scenario?
Our license is per person. So, and we totally recognize people will often have a desktop at home and maybe a laptop for working on the road. So our license definitely supports that model. But if you're working, say you've got a small publishing house and maybe you're working on something and you've got an assistant working on some stuff, that's when we require a second license.
I'm just curious about the inspiration of the name Vellum itself.
We wanted something that was book related. And, I think we just had a big word board on everything from types of bindings to types of papers and it was just something we just kept coming back to, and we liked it. Just sounds cool. So it starts with a V. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very memorable. I think people always it's just easy to remember.
Yeah. So, that's it. And just kind of once we decided on it, we were like, yeah, this is good. So it stuck.
I used my university degree for this name, and I knew exactly what it was because it was the only other time I'm going to know about book history.
Yeah. And then, that is fun. I think people know, some people recognize it just, it's that clear paper, but people who have a bit more knowledge of history of bookmaking, every once in a while come, I love your name. That's such a great history. And then there's also the people who think it's called Vellum, but what can you do?
That also works kind of.
That's your 2.0.
Yeah, if that's what makes you happy, then all right, you can call it Vellum.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're looking for more information about Vellum, you can find it in the show notes and also on our blog about this episode. And if you'd like any extra tips about how to grow your sales, visit kobowritinglife.com.
This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Tara Kremen. This episode was edited by Kelly Robotham. Music was provided by Tearjerker. Production assistance provided by Rachel Wharton. And special thanks to Brad for being a guest on our episode. If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.